Hello, class. I'm back in the rocker again. Essay 4, very similar to Essay 3 in that you now can think about your issue instead of being the abstract terms that you chose from the list for Essay 3, identity, uh, addiction, depression, things of that nature. Now you get to choose from the criticisms and theories from reading and writing about literature. Um, Again, as I've said before, and the easiest way to think about this essay, right? Think of the adjective that comes before the word criticism. So if you want to write about gender, right, then you'll be doing a gender criticism. So if you want to look at gender roles, whether they're from a masculine perspective and machismo and how men are supposed to act, how a female is supposed to act. If you want to look at it from a feminist perspective, and double standards. Remember the fallacies, right? Keep in mind those fallacies. Keep in mind dialectical thinking and Rogerian empathy. If I may, I was watching Trevor Noah 2 nights ago, and the author who wrote, why can't I think of the word of the book? More on that to come. His author, who is a guest, kept using the words worldview and empathy. And they're two words from our book. And how important is it? It was something, and it said part one. I don't know why I can't. Ready Player One, the guy who wrote Ready Player One. It's live learning, live videos, right? Who wrote Ready Player One was a guest on Trevor Noah, and he kept referencing his worldview and having empathy. And I think at no time is that more important than in our current cultural climate and situation. So if you want to write about culture, you're doing a cultural criticism, right? If you want to write about psychology, you're doing a psychoanalytic criticism. Now, notice how they have a lot more options here than in the book, right? In the book, it all starts with formalism, and we'll always analyze the formal elements of fiction, poetry, and plays that we've been using throughout the semester in Essay 1, in Essay 2, in Essay 3, and now in Essay 4. So it's always formalism. Now the key is, what do you want to make a point about? What is your issue going to be? Again, if you want to choose a different topic from Essay number 3's list and look at it from a cultural perspective, that's fine. When you think about it, everything's cultural criticism. Those of you that wrote about addiction or depression or alcoholism, you were already looking at things from a psychological perspective. Those of you that did a character analysis and you looked at actions and motives and development from identity, not only are you probably looking at things from a cultural perspective when you look at the characters and the results of their actions, and a critical thinking perspective, right? Psychological. I mean, is critical thinking and psychology not integrally related? Sorry. Anyway, that being said, this is exactly what would happen if they were live in class lectures. I'm not perfect, and sometimes I may mispronounce a word. Integrally related. So again, forgive me if I'm rambling, but this last paper, you have a lot of options. So your issue is now the idea you want to focus on, and think about the words that come before the criticism. Do you want to write about Marxism, power, money, social class, and how that relates to characters' development? When you think about this essay, just like Essay 3, it's probably best to approach it from a character analysis standpoint. However, if you want to write about how poems, plays, stories reflect cultural ideas and mores at large, that's an option too. You have a lot of freedom for essay number 4. So to review, if you want to write about gender, you're doing a gender criticism. You want to write about psychology, psychological. When you bring in the critics, if you want to use that as the focal point, you're doing a reader response criticism, kind of just synthesizing their ideas with your evaluations and analysis to make a point. The key is, just as Essay 3, we said, what do we learn about blank by analyzing fiction? And you peppered in identity or depression. What do we learn about depression by analyzing Hamlet? What do we learn about paranoia by analyzing Macbeth? Now, continue with that question. Only now you pepper in your issue is, what do we learn about gender? What do we learn about psychology? What do we learn about money and power and class, AKA Marxism? What do we learn about the way women are treated, feminist criticism? What do we learn about readers' responses, history, postmodern themes or ideas, morals, eco issues, right? Eco criticism is a popular school now. So again, you don't just have to choose the selections from the book. You can pick any type of literary criticism and theory that you want to focus on. You can use the Purdue OWL site as a source, right? And I love this first sentence. A very basic way of thinking about literary theory is that these ideas act as different lenses critics use to view and talk about art, literature, and even culture. Remember, criticalthinking.org is always an option. Click on Begin Here, college and university students. And I always like to start with the document, right? Distinguishing between inferences and assumptions, because isn't it the hidden assumptions that affect the characters negatively when they're making decisions and they're choosing their emotional appeals over logical appeals. They choose illogical emotional appeals, illogical kind of fallacious structures instead of logic. So this is a great document, and any of the documents on the left side work as well. So you can go to criticalthinking.org to get sources. You can go to the Purdue OWL to get sources. This is a great way. Remember, think of it as a lens by which you're analyzing. You can go to the library database to get sources. You've got a lot of options. So that being said, the last point I want to make is that when you read about cultural criticism in the book, right, for each of these criticisms, there's 3 or 4 paragraphs, right? The first paragraph describes it. The second paragraph tells you how to do it. And the third and fourth paragraphs give you examples of it. Cultural criticism, as they let us know in the book, Cultural Studies on page 175, is saying that it's not just the classics, it's everything, right? And that first essay we read, Who Cares If Johnny Can't Read? The Value of Books is Overstated, brought that idea to the forefront. So it's not just Shakespeare that teaches us about the human experience, it's everything. So with that being said, I just want to share with you some possible paper topics that students have written about from a cultural criticism standpoint that effectively demonstrate that we can learn about the human condition and the human experience from non-traditional sources like what? Graphic novels, comic books, movies, films, TV shows. I've gotten essays comparing the female characters in Shakespeare, particularly from Othello, with the female characters from Sex and the City, and how Amelia is a little bit more progressive like Samantha. For those of you who've watched the show, I've watched it. It's a very well-written show. And then the Charlotte character is more demure and naive like Desdemona. I've gotten essays comparing Hamlet with the television program Sons of Anarchy. When you think about it, there's a lot of Hamlet quotes if you've watched the program. There's a lot of Hamlet references and allusions in the episode titles, and the whole structure of the storyline. His father dies and his uncle takes over the motorcycle club and marries his mom, and Jax, the son, is left to ponder whether or not his uncle had something to do with his father's death, and et cetera, et cetera. Also, The Lion King is loosely based on Hamlet. I've got essays dealing with that. I've got essays look at LGBTQIA issues from various comparative sources. There's all sorts of television programs and things of that nature. Specifically, I've gotten essays looking at homoeroticism in Red and Stimpy, homoeroticism in Hamlet. Again, in all of literature, you can always look at things when you're dealing with your character analysis from a gender standpoint. And if you want to look at it from a queer theory perspective, by all means. I mean, remember, Lady Macbeth unsexes herself, right? As we talk about with culture too, if you want to look at things from a racial lens and look at the fallacies and how discrimination and double standards and stereotyping and hasty generalizations, right? You can use Othello, right? If you wanted to compare and contrast Othello with other characters in literature, again, you have a lot of freedom. If you remember with this essay, they made a modern day adaptation of Othello called O, with I think it's Julia Stiles as Desdemona. And it's O is Othello, and it kind of takes place in the context of high school with a basketball team and so on and so forth. So I've had students compare and contrast modern film versions of Shakespeare with the play to look at it from a cultural perspective, to learn what we learn about culture by analyzing the modern film versions. The Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann. He also did a film version of The Great Gatsby. Again, if you want to analyze a movie version of something, or television shows, comic books, graphic novels, that's what cultural criticism says. It's everything. All written words could possibly teach us about the human experience effectively and be considered good literature. You want to maybe look at social media posts or something like that and compare and contrast that with gossip in Othello. Or gossip. I've had students write about Gossip Girl. I've had students write about, I'm trying to think here, all sorts of different various television shows and things like that. So hopefully you found this helpful. Please call me if you have any questions as you're thinking about your essay 4. I'd be happy to chat with you, or let me know, and we could set up a Zoom, or we can voice memo through the phones. But again, this essay you have a lot of freedom in this essay. So I hope you enjoy writing it and you pick topics and sources that interest you. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.